right, so today on the Soundiron podcast, we're joined by Chris Dudley. He's an American composer and multi-instrumentalist who is most known as the keyboardist in the multi-Grammy award-nominated band Underoath. Pretty cool. And you've been making your mark in the film scoring world. And yeah, we're just looking forward to having you on the podcast and talk a little bit about your journey. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I just like to frame it as with the Grammy stuff. I just say I've lost many Grammys, and it makes me feel not so pretentious.
Hey, man, getting nominated is no small feat.
It's an honor to be nominated.
Yeah.
No, it's funny because if you get nominated but you don't win, they send you like these little medals. Like it looks like an Olympic medal.
Yeah.
And I've got them hanging up in my studio. And my son, he's 5. He comes in not long ago, and he just likes to play with stuff in my studio. And he's like, "Oh, what are these for, Dad?" And I told him, I was like, "Oh, well, I got nominated for an award, so they gave it to me." He was like, "Well, what's nominated mean?" And I was like, "Well, it means that I almost won, but I didn't." He was like, "So they gave you an award for not winning, so you lost?" And I was like, "Yeah,
Wow.
technically." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And then he just like ran out, and it made me feel real good.
You're like, "Oh, that's funny that you said that. No video games, you're grounded."
Yeah, right.
First things first, I mean, I know that you've been, getting into the film scoring stuff for a while, and we'll get to that. But I want to talk a little bit about how you sort of got into music and playing in bands and doing that stuff. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in a really small town. There wasn't really like a music scene or anything like that. A small Podunk, Florida town, lots of cows. So from where I grew up, doing any sort of entertainment was not like movies, music. That stuff wasn't stuff that we did. It was stuff that we watched and we listened to. Like it was just like worlds apart. But I went to school with Underoath's old singer, Dallas, who is now one of my favorite people ever, and they had started a band, and I just kind of hung out with them all the time because in our school the idea of like liking heavy music was not cool at all. There was like 5 of us that were into heavy music in our school, and like our school was all like it was either country or rap, and there was no in between. So we just kind of hung out together a lot. And there was a point in time, I was a sophomore in high school, and at that time our old singer was playing keyboards and singing at the same time. And he told me, he was like, "Hey, we're either going to find a keyboardist or we're just not going to do keyboards anymore because I just don't want to do both." And at the time, I was a barely passable guitar player, and I was like, "Oh, well, good luck. I hope you're able to find somebody." And they asked me to do it because I was just kind of always around, and they knew that I kind of sort of knew how to play guitar. So they were like, "Oh, well, you could do this if you know how to play guitar." I was a kid in high school, and I just joined a high school band, and I was like, "Yeah, sure." And that was Underoath, and we just kept playing, and it was just like this snowball thing, and it ended up turning into my career, which is crazy. I know that that's not a very common thing to start playing in a band in high school and then be pushing 40 and still having that be your career is wild. But as far as getting into music in general, I just grew up in a musical household and stumbled upon heavy music, and it just spoke to me in a way that nothing else had. I could go through that story for another hour, but that's the gist of it.
What kind of music did you grow up around with your family?
So my mom was really into Aretha Franklin. She listened to a lot of Heart, Melissa Etheridge. She really just liked strong female vocalists. Like that was just kind of her thing. And my dad was really into a lot of classic rock stuff, 38 Special, Dire Straits. But my uncle, he was around a lot, and he kind of leaned into what at the time was the heavier end of things. Back in the 80s, it was Guns N' Roses and AC/DC and stuff like that. He wasn't like jamming like Iron Maiden or anything like that, but it was a slow introduction to heavier stuff. And then my brother was really into he was into hip hop. He was into some heavier stuff. I heard Alice in Chains for the first time because
Nice.
he had bought their tape and he was jamming it in their room, and So it was a really wide variety of music. And what was good is my parents really encouraged particularly my mom, she really encouraged just finding what it is that I like and enjoying it. Because my stepdad was, he only listened to country basically. So, we had a lot of country, Alice in Chains, Napalm Death, and Aretha Franklin jamming at any one point in time in our in our house.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, man, Alice in Chains was one of my favorite bands growing up. Like I never really got too into the grunge scene, but Alice in Chains was one of those bands because they were kind of like borderline metal.
hmm
Like when they were first coming out, it almost like was like heavy, hard blues rock or something. But like they always had this like really dark, not quite full on metal, but it's just like I don't know, they just had such a like dark and unique sound to them. It's like
Yeah, they're super important to me for sure. That Dirt record when it came out was a huge one, and it's funny because back then my mom, she kind of went through a phase where she was I was a teenager, and just going through normal teenager stuff, rebellious things, nothing crazy, but at one point my mom was convinced that the music that I was listening to was the reason that I was not behaving as well as she would have liked me to. And in hindsight, it was just the smallest stuff, like not taking out the trash when she asked me to and stuff like that. But she took away like a bunch of my music. And what's funny is in the years since, we've toured with, most of those bands that she took their music away because she was convinced that they were influencing me in a negative way and had to get that evil out of the house and all that stuff. So like I'll always like, if we tour with a band that she took away at that point, I'll like, FaceTime her while we're like hanging out or something. I'm like, "Oh man, mom, the evil people," and she gets a kick out of it now because I think, she recognizes that, maybe that was not the move back then, but parents are always learning. So
yeah, like it's that napalm death. It's keeping you from taking out that trash.
yeah, right. Yeah, it was Fear Factory, Earth Crisis, Napalm Death, Alice in Chains, Snapcase, a couple other bands. Yeah, she took it all. And to my mom's credit, she was cool. Like she told me that I couldn't have that music anymore, but she also bought it all from me. Like she bought all of my tapes, all of my CDs, because she didn't want to be that person. She was like, "I recognize that you spent a lot of money on this music, and I don't want you to like be out that, but I don't want you to have it anymore." So that was cool, but yeah.
Yeah. Did she keep it or did she just get rid of them or?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I think she may have just chucked them.
She has her own private collection.
Yeah, I was gonna
yeah.
say
On the
she's
weekend.
she's driving around cranking some Fear Factory.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Underoath was massive in high school for me, like 2004, 2005, 2006. That era. I mean, like Underoath was the pinnacle of that.
Oh wow.
Like I grew up in Tennessee, like around Chattanooga, and so all of the bands that we were playing in and like listening to and stuff were all trying to be Underoath. Like it was.
Oh,
like,
that's awesome.
it was very funny.
Yeah, it's funny for me to hear those type of stories because normally it is from people, like it's from my peers, people my age or working in film stuff or like bands that we're going on tour with. And it always makes me, they're always like, "Man, like I remember when I was young and listening to you guys and still listening to you guys, blah blah blah." And they're like, "Man, but I just would have assumed that you would be like older." I'm like, "Well, no, we were just really young then,
Yeah.
like we were just out of, I graduated high school in 2001. So, we were all just, we got started early. So it's, but it's cool for me to hear that stuff because, I remember the bands and the music that was such a big deal to me during those years. And I've had these same discussions with those artists being like, "Hey, it was a really big deal and I don't want to be that guy and I don't want to like nerd out too hard, but I just want you to know that like, what you did was a big deal for me, and so to hear anybody have that sort of relationship with our music too is yeah, it's really cool.
Those formative years are very important for your musical like taste.
Yep, 100%. And what's funny too is like going back, when I go back and listen to the stuff that I listened to in high school, like music just has an insane way of just like taking you to a specific time, like, and I've actually, as I've gotten older, I have kind of put that to good use. Like I have a thing where if I'm going to a place that I've never been, like if we're touring a country that I've never been to or whatever, I find an album that I have never heard before, but I know is supposed to be really good, and I will only listen to that album when I am in that place, so that at some point in the future I go back and listen to that album and kind of use that as like, oh, I remember when I did this, or I remember being here in this place. And that's been a cool little experiment over the past like 10 years or so, and it's worked. I mean, like, I've got certain albums that they're specific to a city, like, and that's been really cool.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, because music does have that ability to just kind of like transport you.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, I remember when, it's like for me, whenever I hear, like Injustice for All, it's like I remember when I was a kid, like discovering it for the first time and like trying to like copy the tape and like make my own, and just like, like hearing like that song, the
Yeah.
yo, I was just like, what is this? And it just takes me back to being a kid, and that's kind of like cool. That's what's cool about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, have you had the I guess the inverse effect where there's an album that you were listening to a lot during like a not good time, and then you hear it again, you're just like, I don't want to listen to that.
I mean, not too much.
It's the reason I hate Jack Johnson for like breakups. It's just every time I hear Jack Johnson, I'm like, it takes me to a bad place.
Yeah, no, I don't personally have those. Like I've got an album. There's this band called Mother's Day Out, and they have an album that I listened to a lot back in the day, and it was around the time where my grandpa was sick, and there was all this like bad stuff going on, and like it takes me back to that, but I still enjoy it. Like I still listen to it, not often, because I think objectively it's not a great album, but it was just so important to me at a particular time.
You're like, I'll let all the bad stuff slide. This is stuff's still good. So
Yes, exactly.
My question actually is the Underoath breakup, like 2013. What did you do from 2013 to 2015?
I was working from home doing, I lucked out so hard. Like I always say that I've hit the life lottery like 3 times.
Nice.
One of them being, being able to play in my band, and then my wife and family being as awesome as they are. And then also when we broke up, my brother he's like a higher up at this company in DC, and basically it's like nerd computer work, but they do like hardware support for like government contracts and stuff. And he hit me up and he's like, hey, there's this position, because he knew I was really good with computers, and that was just something that I naturally leaned toward. He was like, we have this position that pays well, and you work from home, and you basically like help, troubleshoot computers and schedule technicians and all this stuff. And it was just a, remote desk job, but it was honestly the sickest, because I would just hang out in my office and talk to people on the phone and be on a computer all day, and my kids would, run in and out, and I was able to hang out with them whenever I wanted. And I take my lunch breaks and we'd go fly kites, and it was like, it was cool, man. I didn't hate it at all.
So yeah, going from like a touring constantly kind of atmosphere to a stay-at-home work, that is like an interesting transition. I was just curious because I saw, like, I was reading the wiki, and I was like, what was Chris doing for those it's like 2.5 years of not being a part of this band, and like it's such a big part of your identity as a musician. So I was curious if it was like the Paul McCartney after the Beatles breakup, like what do I do now? Just like an emotional negative place.
Yeah, there was an odd, man. I'll still never forget, because we didn't take a break. Like we broke up, and we were all convinced that we were never going to play together again. And we had this, like, what we thought was our farewell show, in Florida. And then I went home that night. And when I woke up in the morning, I'll never forget, I realized for the first time that like I was not Chris from Underoath anymore. And that was who I had been since high school. Like I realized like how much of my identity was kind of wrapped up in this band and this career. And that was an odd thing. And I don't know if I would necessarily say it was negative. It was just an odd realization that like, hey, like now I am Chris, husband, father, whatever work I end up doing, I don't know if I'll necessarily identify with that, but it was, it was 100% a really good thing that we did that, because years later when we did decide to start doing some stuff together again, we had all changed a lot personally, and that change was necessary for us to be able to do this long term. We had a lot of stuff we needed to work out, and when we broke up, everybody kind of split off.
Yeah.
And did their own things, like wildly different things. But it was good. Like I look back on those years like honestly extremely fondly, because I was able to be at home all the time, hang out with my wife and kids all the time. And yeah, and honestly, just to be frank, like there's something about having just a 9 to 5 gig that is really appealing, not having to constantly be looking at like, okay, like what's the next tour going to be? When's the next album going to be? When's the next film going to be? It's literally just, I'm going to sit here and do this work, and then I'm going to go and have lunch, go and have dinner, and like my bills are going to be paid. So, yeah, I dug it.
Yeah, I think especially because like the touring life in general is just so grueling. It's like awesome when you're doing it, but then you come home and you hear some people say they have like tour withdrawals, or they're just like they feel like I'm not doing anything that cool anymore, and you just start to kind of just like miss being out there, being on the road. But like it's tough, and for some people I think it's harder for them to kind of go back to the 9 to 5. So that's cool that for you it was actually like a refreshing experience, kind of like, because it is a nice change when you're like, wow, like hunting for I mean, I doubt you guys really had to like hunt for tours very much, but like starting off in the early days, it's definitely tough, just because you're just out there just like grinding, getting on every show and tour that you can until you have that sort of stability touring.
Yeah, and I think because we had really only toured, like basically once we graduated high school, literally like the following week we hit the road, and we didn't stop until we broke up.
Wow.
So toward the end of that time, I just grew to really dislike traveling. So for me, the idea of being at home and just hanging was it was great, and that break that I now know was a break, that we took really put a lot of stuff into perspective, like, because, now when we tour, we have like a spoken agreement that we will only tour a specific amount, because we want to make sure that when we're out there we're enjoying it and we're having fun, because toward the end of that time before we broke up, like it was like the shows themselves always awesome, like always having a great time, but it was just what we did. Like it was like this machine that was going. It was like, you write and then you record and then you tour for a year and a half. And it was like an obligation. Like, I remember like toward the end when we'd be going to Europe, I would just be like, oh gosh, like I don't want to leave home really. Like I want to just hang out. So yeah, but it's all perspective, man. Like, now when we go out, I'm like, I'm out being a tourist. I'm out doing fun stuff. I'm like hitting up as many people as I can to hang out and just taking it all in. And I think that's partially because of when we broke up, but also because we just don't tour as much anymore. So now it's like, we're thankful for it.
Yeah.
You took a sabbatical. You know how professors take a sabbatical and they go travel. You took a sabbatical by staying home.
Yes, which was great for me, but it wasn't as great for my wife, because she just loves traveling. And she really, like, that's something that she just wanted to do immediately when we broke up. She was like, "Hey, we should like take the kids on vacation. We should go here, we should go there." And I was like, I want to be here. I don't want to go anywhere. And thankfully we've kind of come full circle now where, we're both looking forward to, taking the kids places and, doing vacations and stuff. But it was funny because, for a while she was like, well, you got to go and do all this stuff. And she's
Yeah.
like, I want to go and do stuff. And it was a little bit of I wouldn't even say contentious thing, but there was definitely a misaligned desire as far as travel went for a long time.
Yeah, I can see it. She's like, that's not fair. You get to go and like see all these cool places, and
Yeah, it's work though. It's work.
Yeah, and she, she used to come along a lot,
Nice.
Before we had kids. But that, once we had kids, like, it
Mhm.
just wasn't really possible anymore. So,
Yeah.
but overall, just super thankful. It's the fact that music has been my career for this long is just nuts.
So you went from self-taught keyboardist, like, oh, this is how you trigger something. This is maybe a major scale in high school, to you just self-produced the newest Underoath album and your film scoring. So like that's a huge transition. How did you get lessons in high school, or like how on earth did you progress like this?
I really wish I would have, honestly. It would have saved me so much time and effort. Really, it's just trial and error on everything. Again, if I would have buckled down and got a year's worth of lessons at some point, it probably would have saved me 3 years worth of figuring stuff out. So it's a lot of, well, what is this piece of equipment? What does it do? I'm going to turn a bunch of knobs until I figure out how it works. And as far as the the production on the album goes, I did all of my stuff, but then other guys in the band are better with production as far as full band things go. And we work with our friend who's an engineer to kind of like smooth out some of those edges. And yeah, I mean, all of us are literally just self-taught dudes that don't know a whole lot about music theory in general. We all know what we like. We all know how to do what we do. And when we come together, I think cool stuff happens, but as far as the film stuff goes, it was a very similar thing where I knew that working in film is something that I wanted to do. And I had talked about doing it for years. And very long story short, my wife one day just said, well, why don't you just say that you do it and then see if something happens,
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I said that I was opening up my studio for writing projects. And if anybody wanted to have me write on an album or a video game or a film or whatever, that I would do that. And then from there, it was just one of those things where I'm building the bridge as the train's going across it, sort of things. And but what makes me feel good is like now, looking at interviews with some of my favorite film composers of all time, like it was a very similar thing where they're like, there was a guy that had a short that he was working on, and I just told him that I could do it, and I had no idea what I was doing. And now, that's been years going on, and the learning curve for the film stuff was huge. There was just so many skills and so many things that I didn't know. But it's I got a YouTube premium account, so I never have to watch another YouTube ad, and I just dove in, and years worth of just teaching myself. And I'm still learning every day. There's still a lot that I don't know, but I'm working on my 6th feature now, and it's just been amazing, honestly.
What are some things that you learned, like if someone was trying to get into doing the same thing, like coming from the band background and getting into scoring and stuff, like what types of advice that you learned along the way that you would offer them? Where would you point them in the in the right direction, or what kind of advice would you give them?
So one thing that I always tell people is just to I actually, if anybody's listening to this podcast and they want this, just find me on, contact me anyway. I'm super easy to reach on social media. But I scoured the internet to find clips of films that have the scores taken out, action scenes, romance scenes, chase scenes, whatever it is, and I just started writing to those scenes. And I still have the Dropbox. I still have all the clips. And I found out really quick, like what worked and what didn't. And then there was a handful of YouTube channels that honestly really, really helped. Junkie XL has a YouTube channel that is a wealth of knowledge. You could charge a high dollar for that info and it would be worth it. Christian Henson has an amazing YouTube channel that really gets into a lot of that stuff. I always point people in that direction, but really the biggest advice that I always give is just start doing it. Drag a piece of video in and mess around, figure out, learn about spotting. That's obviously a big thing, figuring out, okay, like what kind of music should go here? What tempo should go here? What should not go here? What instrumentation will work versus won't work? And yeah, it's just so much about just doing the work and repetition and writing 15 things that don't work. And then once you hit one that does, find out why does that work? And why does this other one not? Keeping at it,
What are you for your composing, what DAW are you using?
Logic.
You're in Logic?
Yeah, I was on Pro Tools forever. Pro Tools was my first DAW back in, I think I got it in 2004. And then once I got into the film work, I was realizing how unintuitive Pro Tools was for virtual orchestration, like writing solely in Pro Tools, specifically when you're doing a lot of MIDI stuff, VSTs, things like that. Because I had a couple friends that were working in Logic at the time and Cubase as well. But I saw how much more user-friendly it was. And it was honestly a big decision to jump DAWs because that's a big commitment.
Yeah.
But what I realized was there were so many things where I'm like, oh, it's taking me 8 seconds to do this thing in Pro Tools, but in Logic, it takes me 3 seconds. A lot of very small things like that. And I was looking forward and I'm like, if this is going to be my career moving forward for the long term, how much of my life am I going to waste on these small things when I'm starting now. Like I literally switched as soon as I started working in film stuff. I'm like, if I start now and just go from the ground up, then, I'll have all these shortcuts. I'll have this stuff that works so much better. And then in 10 years, I will have saved months of work by doing this. And I think I have.
Yeah. It's always a scary thing when you're switching DAWs. Cause like I started on Logic Pro 9 and I had a lot of friends that were using Cubase and I was just like, but I spent all this time, when I first got a Mac and in Logic, I was just like going on YouTube, like how to record, how to edit, how to do this, how to program, like all these little like step input. I remember when I learned about that, I was like, oh, I don't actually have to like play in all this stuff because I was, I'm not a good keyboardist, but I was like, oh, like you can actually just hit step input and do. But it's cool because like once you sort of learn all those kind of like DAW fundamentals, it's pretty easy to kind of like transition those.
Yes.
Right into another DAW. It's just like, okay, instead of here, it's over here, or it's named this.
I got one of these things for Logic. I've had it forever, but it's one of these like keyboard overlays that shows all of the, all of functions. The functions, all the shortcuts and all that. I don't need it anymore because I know all of it now, but I got it back when I first started. Yeah. And I'd recommend anybody getting one of those for, any DAW you're working in because there's, so many things that were on here. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize there was a shortcut for that. Like, and it's just sitting there on the keyboard.
Yeah. Have you ever experimented with like Touch OSC or is it Touch OSC or like Metagrid, or do you ever experiment with any of those?
Yeah, I had some of that. There's another, is it Lemur?
Yeah. Lemur's another one.
Yeah. And then also, in Logic, there's a dedicated iPad remote app. Which does a lot of that stuff, or most of it. And I used that for a while, but I don't really anymore because I have this thing. Let me see if I can pick it up here. Oh, hold on. So it's this thing called a console by Monogram.
Oh, yeah, the Monogram.
Yeah, and I basically all of my shortcuts, all of the touch input things that I was using on an iPad on the side, I now have routed to physical knobs, touch sensitive knobs, things like that. And for me, that just works a lot better for my workflow because I like being able to not have to look at it. Like I can have my one hand on the mouse and then be turning a knob or clicking a knob or one of this round thing. It's like touch sensitive, so I have that routed to all these like different XY things in different VSTs. So yeah, I nerd out really hard on that stuff.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get a good controller for doing sort of XY type things because I was looking at I think it was Lemur or TouchOS. Yeah, they have like where you can like program in like an XY pad and stuff and use it on an iPad. But yeah, I'd be curious to try messing around with something like that for an XY thing because yeah, like I don't really like using them like with the mod wheel and the little slider. Like
Yeah.
some contact libraries will have it where it's set up like that.
Mhm.
But because something about actually being able to physically go in and out of the whole like XY thing, and especially when you're doing a lot of like sound design stuff. So what's the controller that you use for that for the XY stuff?
It's called a Creative Console by Monogram.
Mhm.
And what the thing is it's all here. I'll just take it for anybody who's watching the video. Like it's all modular, so you
Yeah.
can take it all apart and move stuff around. And like this thing here, it's for anybody who's listening. It's like a round. There's like a dial that turns around, and then the middle of it is touch sensitive, and you can go up, down, left, right, and you can go all around like that.
Oh wow.
So I have that routed to the XY on like the Thrill instrument that Native Instruments has, Ashlight, like Straylight, all of those NI libraries that have that XY thing right in the middle. I have it routed to this. But it's also, you can route anything to anything. Like I have all kinds of keyboard shortcuts routed for create new virtual instrument track, delete, duplicate, like all that stuff I have routed to different buttons and knobs. And yeah, it's all about just improving speed for me.
Yeah. Do you ever get into using the Stream Deck?
No, I haven't. I've seen some other people using that, and I haven't looked into it much, and I'm not sure what I would use that for that I'm not already using the console for, but I would love to hear an argument for it because I'm always like, I've got my eyes wide open for any piece of gear or any program that's just going to make something easier. Like shove it in my eyeballs. I want to see it.
Yeah, the Stream Deck, it's see this here.
Yeah.
I have the smaller one, but dude, like I'm one of those guys that like, I got Metagrid on this, I'm using Stream Deck for that, or like having all these different things. Like I love that being able to kind of like even like mix and match different stuff.
So
like
what do you
usually
use the Stream Deck for specifically?
mainly it's usually like day-to-day work stuff. Like I have even where like opens up File Explorer or opens up like a notepad or opens up, if I'm doing stuff in Affinity, or I even have stuff where it I can control my lighting so you can see it like change in the back,
Yeah. Okay.
stuff like that. So it's like little things, or have it where like opens up contact or something like that. Usually I use the Stream Deck mostly now for like my day-to-day work stuff, but it's just cool, man, because like you can program all kinds of stuff, like especially if you're doing any like live streaming, you can have it integrate with OBS, and it's just a lot of really cool stuff. You can get really crazy with it.
That's cool.
But like you can have like folders nested inside. So if you're like, oh, all right, I have this one for, for Logic, and then you click it and then it opens up all these other ones. You can have like folders within folders.
Okay.
So it's really
I'm gonna check into that specifically. I'm sure that if I just go on YouTube and type, Stream Deck Logic implementation, I'm sure that there's going to be like a million hacks in there for it, and you may sell me on it.
Yeah, because like the cool thing about it too, because like using an iPad, it's very like you're still like you're tapping on a screen. So like I think for the, like with the Monogram stuff, if you're very like a tactile person, you like to physically touch things. Like it's cool because like when you push the buttons, it's like a physical button that you push, so it has that very nice like that physical response. If you're into that, and
I am very much into physical response.
yeah, so it's just cool to like have that sort of thing where it's like you can physically push. So like if you do have like, let's say like 3 different commands here and you're like doing stuff, and then you go like, all right, if you're like doing like like fixing MIDI that you just played in, and you have like certain things for just like lighting stuff up or like randomizing it a little bit, all that kind of stuff. Like it's definitely a fun thing to experiment with, and it's definitely has its use.
And then I'll tell you from the opposite end, mine collects dust.
Well, maybe I'll hit you up if you want to sell it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So could you tell us about a typical day in the life, like a non-touring day and then a typical life touring day? So let's say like a film scoring day, maybe you're starting out a project, and then a normal like touring day. Let's say you're in Italy or something.
Got it. So non-touring day, I'll wake up around 8 or so. Usually just whenever my kids wake up, I'll get up, have breakfast with them. And then my studio's on my property, so I don't have to commute anywhere, which is good. So I'll just walk over to the studio and, I'll take a look at, because at any one time, sometimes I'll be working on more than one thing at a time. Like what I like to do is have like if I'm working on a feature, I like to have another project that I'm working on also, like whether it's something smaller, whether it's some sort of commercial thing or a short or something like that, because then if I hit a roadblock on either of those, I can just flip over to the other one. So I'll usually look at, whichever one is the most pressing, and I'll pull that up and start working on it. I have a cue sheet that I work off of for every film. So I'm able to, look at a spreadsheet to see like, okay, like how much music do I have to write? How much time do I have to write it in? And sometimes it'll just be like whatever I feel like, I'm like, okay, well, there's this like super intense scene at the end that I'm not really feeling that, but there's this lighter scene toward the middle that I think I could do something for that. So I'll work on that for a couple hours, take a break, whether it's, moving on to another project or what. I'll get interrupted about 10 times throughout there with my kids or my wife coming in and asking me questions or whatever, which I always welcome. It's my favorite. And then, I'll basically work all day. I'm usually in pretty solid contact with whatever director I'm working with. I like sending small ideas to get feedback, to make sure that I'm going down the right path. Yeah, so I'll be texting, emailing throughout the day. And then I try to keep office hours. Like I try to start around 9 and I try to be done around 6, just because I'm trying to keep a solid family hang time as well. I'm not always really good at that. Sometimes I'll be working late if I need to. But yeah, and then I go to the movies at night, or I'll hang out with my wife and watch some trash TV. Just something to turn my brain off. But yeah, normally going to the movies at night if there's something out that I want to see, that's my go-to. And then on tour, it just depends on where we're at. Like we just got our last headlining tour that we did, just got done in March of this year. And in the US, normally my day will be waking up whenever my body wakes up. That's probably one of my favorite things about being on tours. I just sleep as long as I want.
Yeah, there's plenty of time for that.
Yes. So I sleep till whenever I want, and then I wake up. First thing always is I get on my phone and I look at Google Maps before I even get out of my bunk to see where we are, and then see what coffee shops are around.
Mm-hmm.
So I get up, go get coffee, go get lunch, and then usually by the time I'm done with that, that'll be about sound check time. We'll sound check, and then usually between sound check and our show is a solid like 6 hours. So if I'm working on a film at that point, that's when I would go and set up my mobile studio to work, wherever I can. Sometimes I'll get a day room. I'll go to a hotel and, set up in a hotel for the day. More often I will find a room in the venue that's not being used, and I'll go and work there until showtime. But if I'm not working on a film, it's literally just hanging out, just
chilling.
Just finding something to do.
Yeah.
I like connecting with people on, Instagram, Twitter, and, because a lot of times people will reach out and be like, hey, you're coming to my city. Like, I'd love to grab a cup of coffee or something. And I almost always take people up on that. I like just kind of hanging. So I'll, go meet up with somebody for coffee or go get lunch or dinner or whatever. Hang out with the other bands on the tour, hang out with my dudes, lots of FaceTiming with the family throughout the day. And yeah, and then we play usually between 9 and 10 o'clock and then get done. And I'm usually the first one in bed. I'll usually be in bed by 1 or 2 watching a movie in my bunk. Usually that's how I'll go to sleep. So yeah.
I got to hear about the mobile setup.
Oh, it's awesome. I actually, if you look, this case right here that I'm pointing to for anybody who's just listening, it's an SKB Fly Studio something. I forget the name of it, but it has it's all contained in this one thing. It's got wheels on it. So if you set it flat on a table. The lid lifts off. Everything lives in it. Like I don't ever take anything out of it. My laptop is on the top. I open that up, and then you take the front off, and there's drawers that come out. On one drawer is my SSDs for all my libraries, all the power supplies, things like that, my Apollo Twin X, and then my CalDigit hub to run everything through. And then on the second drawer is since the Monogram console is modular, I have a smaller configuration that I use for the road. So it'll be the console and then my MIDI controller, which I use the M Audio or Oxygen Pro Mini. That's what it's called. So yeah, I have an Oxygen Pro Mini, and then I just work with the laptop screen, which is not ideal because I like having a multiple screen setup when I'm working on film stuff. But if it's between having a somewhat less than ideal setup and getting work done, albeit slower, or not getting work done at all, I'll normally take the first one.
And then you're a trackpad guy?
No, I have I bring my Magic Mouse on the road. I need to get on the trackball train, I think. It's just another. Do you have one?
Yeah, that's what I got right here. I got the Kensington trackball. There's a few different ones. They have like some smaller ones and stuff, but yeah, I started using this because I hate doing this with a mouse, like, and I started getting wrist pains. So with this, it's just literally, it's almost like using the Magic pads?
Yes.
It's almost kind of like that, but almost like a blend between that and like an actual mouse. And it's cool because there's 4 different buttons on it. And technically, it's almost like 6 buttons because there's different things that you can assign to this too. So if there's stuff like deleting things or adding stuff, like I have stuff where I can open and close like instruments and like delete stuff, or like if I push 2 buttons, I can open up my mixer. So if you're doing stuff on like the laptop and you just got the one screen, you can have it where like opens up and closes, the picture, stuff like that. Or like it's really handy because you don't have to leave anywhere. It's just right here.
Yeah, so, I'm going to do that at some point, but I feel like moving to a trackball is a similar commitment from like changing DAWs, because I've always used a Magic Mouse. I just like it. But there's a lot of people that I know what they're talking about that said that once they switch to a trackball, they're like, oh, it's a game changer. Like it takes some getting used to, but then you would never want to go back. So
yeah.
Maybe one of these days. It's low on my list of things to do at the moment.
Yeah, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And then headphones? What headphones are you using?
Oh, I have when I'm on the road, I use my in-ears, the ones that I use on stage. They are 68 audio, I think they're A12s, 12 driver in-ears.
Killer.
Yeah, because one of the main reasons I use those is because they're completely isolating. So if I'm in a loud dressing room, or if I'm in a hallway, or wherever I'm working, like if I were using these headphones, which I love, they're the DT 770s,
Bear Dynamic. If
I were using these, I wouldn't be able to work because I would just be hearing everything all the time.
Yeah, open back.
Yeah.
So you're a movie buff. What are some movies that you've enjoyed this year?
Oh man. Now that I'm on the spot, I really love The Night House. I thought that was great. Top Gun Maverick is probably the most fun I've had in the movies in the past.
Most American movie.
Oh, dude, it's so fun. I had such a good time. I thought Men was wild. That was just very unexpected. Everything Everywhere All at Once, I was in awe of. As I was sitting in the theater, it was one of those things where there's a handful of movies I can remember where when I was watching them in the theater, I was like, oh, I'm seeing something special that I've never seen before, and I'm going to remember watching this for a very long time. And that was that movie for me.
Nice. Are you on Letterboxd?
No, I need to be.
Yeah, you should, for sure.
I know. I just feel like that would just be another thing that I would need to keep up with on my phone, and I kind of don't need that. I'm trying to shrink the amount of things that I'm having to.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Going for. Yeah. What about you guys?
Did you watch RRR on Netflix?
No, I heard it was great though.
It's wild. We talked about that last week, and it's absurd, but you should definitely check it out.
Yeah.
I've been getting into the Apple Plus.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff on there.
Yeah, because I saw there was I watched like the first episode of the show called The Servant, and
Oh
it's just
yeah.
like I was like, man, this show's kind of there's some twisted stuff going on. So I've been like slowly kind of chipping away at that. And on a lighter side, I actually just started watching this show. I think it's on Hulu. It's called This Fool, and it's
Yeah.
it's hilarious.
Yeah?
It's yeah, especially like if I don't know if you just like stupid funny humor. It's really good. It's just it's dumb, but it's so funny.
It's set in South Los Angeles, and I spent some time there, so it's like especially on point.
Yeah, it's just like all the humor and stuff. Like it's just stuff that I grew up around in. You know, like just I have a lot of friends who were Mexican and stuff, and just growing up like where I lived, like that kind of humor is everywhere. So like for me, I'm just like, yeah.
That's awesome. Have you guys seen the rehearsal?
I watched the first 20 minutes. I had to turn it off. it was
Because
so uncomfortable, man.
It is one of the best things I've ever seen. Like, if you didn't get through the first episode and didn't see the second episode, you have no clue how much more happens.
How much more pain.
It is incredible. Like,
I don't think I've heard that one actually.
Oh, it's on HBO Max.
Nathan Fielder.
Yeah, do you know Nathan Fielder?
Mm-mm.
Okay, he does this show called Nathan for You, which is another great show. But this is like his magnum opus. The rehearsal is. I can't recommend it enough. It's amazing.
So it awkwarded you out, Nathan? Freaked you out? What's going? Like I don't know much about it, so I'm intrigued now to see like.
I loved the premise, but he's basically like rehearsing uncomfortable situations with people and like helping them by practicing it beforehand.
Oh, okay.
So I love the idea of it, but just the actual execution is just you would not. I don't think you would like it because you don't really like British comedy at all. Like, I think you'd have a hard time. But
Craig, how about this? Watch the first episode.
Okay.
And then hit me up and let me know what you think. Because I am just screaming about this show from the rooftops. My wife hates it. She gets like actually aggravated when I put it on because she's like, oh, because she views it as something she has to endure, which it kind of is. But I love how divisive it is. Like people who love it, and
polarizing.
People who hate it, I think understandably like really, really hate it. But people agree that like it is one of the most weird. It's weird, and it goes so. I know you only watched half of the first episode, but it goes so much further than what you saw that like. At the end of like the third episode, I was watching it, and me and my wife were watching it together, and I was like, I feel like I'm high right now. Like, am I watching? Not to give anything away, but I'm like, is this him or is this an actor or what situation are they in now? Like, and there's all this stuff going on where I had my hands on my head at one point, and I was like, what is happening? I love it. So
got you sucked in. Better Call Saul. Any of you guys watching that?
I'm not up to date. I'm way behind.
Oh, come on.
So I have not seen an episode of Better Call Saul, and that honestly excites me because I know from everybody that I've talked to about it that it's probably one of the better television shows of the past 10 years.
Yeah.
And knowing that I just have an entire series of some of the best television ever in front of me is pretty exciting. I just haven't gotten into it yet.
Yeah. Well, they're about to do the last episode tonight. So after this,
maybe I'll just hop in there and then I'll work my way back. You know, I'm sure that'll work, right?
The best show I've seen this whole year is called The Bear on Hulu.
Ooh, yeah. I watched the first 2 episodes. It's so good.
Yeah, it's really well done. Like back of house Chicago cooking. It's a lot of fun. Shot really well.
What I love about that show is like there's not a ton of like promo happening for it, but everybody's just talking about it, and that's so encouraging that there's just a piece of art out there that is just objectively very, very good, and people are just like spreading the word about it, and it's like picking up steam. And yeah, I'm stoked on that one.
Speaking of art, could you tell us about a personal project you're excited about?
Oh, actually, I this is top of mind because I literally just launched it today, but I launched remote lesson sessions today because cool. I had a guy This is about 6 months ago. He messaged me on Instagram and he was like, hey, I want to learn how to do what you do. And I would love for you to teach me. What would it take to make that happen? And like, that was never even a thing in my brain of like teaching people anything, because I feel like I'm always just trying to learn everything.
Yeah.
And we had worked out some details, and I worked with him for a couple weeks, and it was all remote, and we ironed out the technical kinks and whatnot. And it was honestly awesome. Like, he had specific questions about things, and then I taught him some stuff, and then he would go back and he would make a song or a cue or whatever, and then the next week he would send it to me, and then we would go over it the following week. And it was a thing where we were just going back and forth, and he was learning all this stuff. Like, he wanted to know how to use compressors and how to spot a film and like just all these different things. And at the end of it, I was like, that was really cool. Like, it was for me, it was rewarding because I was able to like help someone along in what it is that they do. And honestly, it wasn't super hard because like I had to figure out all the tech stuff, and that was a lot.
Yeah.
But now that that's all in place, I decided to just open that up to anyone who's interested.
Mm-hmm.
And I launched that about 2 hours ago as
Oh,
we're
wow.
recording this, and I've already got like a whole calendar of people who have already signed up. So
Oh, crazy.
I'm really stoked to jump into that because the thing that's cool is I have a thing on the sign up sheet where I have this questionnaire of like, are you a musician? How experienced are you? So like, I've got anywhere from like people who they don't have a DAW yet, and they are wanting to get into like making electronic music, to people who are like pros in their field and have specific things that they want to like be able to focus in on. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting. When you say personal project, that's the most personal thing I have going on right now, because all my other stuff is film work and whatnot, which is all very cool, but definitely stuff I've done, and this is just something new for me. So I'm super stoked on it.
Yeah, the cool thing about that is, especially with like what you were saying, how you're more used to just learning and just trying to learn stuff. The thing about teaching that's cool is like you learn so much more about what you do when teaching somebody. So teaching someone is like such a great way of even just kind of like reinforcing ideas or thinking about the way you do stuff, especially when you're trying to explain it. You analyze what you do like a little bit more because now you're trying to like convey that knowledge.
Yes.
So I think if anything, it's going to be super rewarding, for you and for the people. So that's really cool, man.
Yeah, I'm super stoked on it. And also it's one of those things where I'm like, I hope it works well. I hope people enjoy it. And I guess time will tell, but that launched today, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the Orphan First Kill. So that seems like a really cool, pretty big project. How did you get brought on? Because you were doing some additional composition for that, or?
Yeah. So that happened because so the head the main composer on that, his name's Brett. We've known each other for years. We both come from a band background, and we both got into scoring film, and it's one of those. He's one of those guys where we were keeping a similar schedule in the months leading up to me being brought on, and he would be texting me. He was like, "Hey, what do you use for this?" I'm sure everybody has those guys where they, you just go back and forth. You're like, "Hey, like, I'm trying to do this thing. Like, what would you do?" Or like, "Hey, do you have a good library for this? Like, what would you recommend?" Or, just venting about like, "Oh man, like this is not going well, blah, blah, blah." And one night he hit me up and he was like, "Hey, we're coming to the finish line on this thing. But I need some help, and we're already talking to each other all the time anyway. Would your schedule allow you to hop on to this film for the next?" At the time I thought it was going to be like 2 weeks, and it ended up being like 5 weeks of work. But he's like, would you be able to hop on and basically bring the film over the finish line? And I was like, yeah, like I like the first film, and I thought that the idea for the second one was really cool, and I know Brett is great at what he does. And it was great because, the way that he writes is very, he writes in specific tempos and specific keys. So a lot of the stuff can kind of be like Legoed around.
Mhm.
So, I would get specific sections of the film, and then I had all the files for all the score that he had written up until that point, and it was like hey, here's this, this big section, these 3 or 4 big sections of the film. Use what I have, and then if there's anything that's not working, just write it. And it was honestly a great experience, because I was able to, listen to the cues that he had. And I'm like, oh, the percussion for this one is great, but I think that the string should do this other thing. So I would like bring in his percussion. I would write a thing on top of it. Or, I would hear something that he might not hear in a cue that he already had, where I'm like, oh, this would work great here. Why don't we just move it in and use it there? Or there'd be a section where I'm like, we don't really have anything that works good for this. So I would just write that whole thing. And for me, honestly, just working with him was probably my favorite part of it, because we had been talking about doing something for so long, and it turned out really cool. I'm stoked on how the film turned out in general. I haven't seen it with all the final like VFX and everything. I'm gonna go see it on Thursday night here, and that'll be my first time seeing it with all of that. So I'm curious to see how it all turns out. But it is equally it takes an equal wild turn at a point in the film, which I think is cool as the first one. There's stuff that I was not expecting. So because I watched it when he first sent it over just to kind of get an idea, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like I was not expecting that. So yeah, it's rad. I like it a lot.
That's awesome, man. It's really cool.
Thursday night, my oldest daughter wants to go see it, and I'm still trying to determine if I'm gonna bring her with me, because it's a little much.
Yeah.
I mean, she's 13, but I don't know. It would be a cool experience to be able to go and take her to see a movie that I worked on in a theater, but it might be a little too much. I might go by myself.
You can do the classic eye cover thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? I'll know when the bad stuff's coming.
Yeah, close your eyes and cover your ears. It's about to get weird.
Are you putting the kids to work? Are they learning music and going to be studio assistants soon?
Man, it's funny. Like they have every opportunity to get into music if they please, but neither of them are my oldest anyway. Our 2 daughters, neither of them have really taken a huge musical interest. They both love dancing. That's like they're in like 19 dance classes or something crazy. They're really into that. My oldest is really getting into coding lately, so she's nerding out on that stuff, which I think is rad. My son, he's about to be 6. He really likes coming in here and just making beats. Like when he'll come in and I'll just get like a machine or a damaged drum kit mapped to the keyboard, and he'll just hit stuff. And he's actually like, I've been teaching him like beats, like actually like how to, different time signatures. I taught him how to do a slow paradiddle, and he thinks it's super cool. So yeah, I think he probably shows the most interest out of any of them.
I watched your Instagram video about the core memory. My son finding out what I do or whatever.
Oh yeah, that was. I'll never forget that night. That was a very, very cool thing, because that video, because like on that tour, I was up on this riser, but there's only one way to get on and off, which is like behind me. There's this little like cove that you can't really see, and my tech, so he would lean around the riser like every like 2 songs or so to check to make sure that everything was working properly. So he would give me like a thumbs up, and I would give him a thumbs up if everything's good, or I would like tell him, hey, something needs to get fixed or whatever. But my son was like, as far as my eye line goes, directly behind whenever my tech would come around. So my son just sees me doing a thumbs up in his general direction every like 2 songs or so. So he just started like throwing me a thumbs up like anytime I was even remotely looking over there. And it was it was magic. It was
really
cute
cool. As hell.
Yeah.
Do you have like a stretching regimen or anything you do beforehand? Your show persona is very intense. You got a lot of moves.
Oh yeah, not on purpose, but I act like an idiot. But I stretch my neck a lot because my neck is it's kind of toast.
It's not as young as it used to be.
No, it's trash for sure. Yeah, stretch my neck a lot. Try to stretch my hamstrings a good bit because they're really tight anyway. And I've hurt my back like twice on tour, and it's like the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing like super crazy. I try to stretch and warm up enough just to where I won't hurt myself, but no more.
Yeah, no backflips on stage.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not that agile at all.
Yeah, especially when like you're doing the home studio thing and you're just sitting like this. Like I remember because I recently played some shows and I haven't played live in like 10 years. So like I can only imagine like what it's like being, and I'm not even that active like you. So it's like it's like that scary thing of especially taking a break and then like coming back. Like was that like how was that for you when when you guys were like making the return? Kind of like, man, do I still got it? I don't know. Like what if some happens or you pull something? Because that was my fear. Like what if I just fall over or something? Like just get just dizzy or something. I don't know. It's like
Yeah. No, that was a real thing. Like I remember when we got back together to play our first show, we decided because there's this venue in Florida that we had the show booked. It's called Janus Live, and it's like I think it's like a 3,000 cap venue. But we realized that we hadn't played together in literal years, so we're like, we don't want our first time back on stage to be like on like a real stage in front of people who are really paying attention. So we decided to book this secret show in this bar like right down the street from it that holds like 150 people.
Nice.
I recently saw a video from that, and it's funny because we were sound checking and I was just like, man, this seems so foreign. I mean, I'm sure Craig, you can relate from like not having, you were not playing live for 10 years. It was only like 3 for me, but I was like, man, I don't know if this still feels correct.
Yeah.
And then it was about literally 30 seconds into the first song, I was just like, oh yes, this is what I do. Yeah. And it was a real quick thing. And I was just like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like this just works. So
yeah. Were you nervous at all, or how did you feel kind of leading up? Was it more like nerves of just hoping that it was, going to go as smooth as you would hoped? Or, cause I mean, I would think, playing in front of a lot of people over time, like that's almost kind of like a numbing thing, but it's more like, were you like nervous at all in that way, or just kind of like the not knowing of how it was going to turn out?
I think it was a combination of nerves, but excitement. Just something, particularly like if you're playing a very small place like that, people, it's just a different vibe. And, I still remember that show. Like I'm just like standing there. I was like, hey, this is going to get wild. And it did. It was insanity. But it was, mostly excitement, but also a little bit of hesitation. But, all that hesitation was gone within the first like 30 seconds. So that was good. And there's a point, I saw a video of the show where I can see the moment where I was like, oh, like, cause I turned around and a friend of mine was standing behind me and I was just like, oh, it's just like riding a bike.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I'm fine.
Yeah. It's crazy how it is really, really much like that, because it's funny. I feel like playing in front of smaller crowds is more nerve wracking than bigger crowds. Like, I don't know if I mean, for some people it's, 5 people or 500 people can still be the same nervous for them. But it was weird because I felt like I've been more nervous sometimes playing in front of like smaller crowds because it is so intimate and like you almost feel like, there's just like right there and you can see. But like when it's like more people, it's like almost like a blurred effect. It's just kind of like, okay, like I'm just doing this thing and you don't really like, at least for me, like I don't quite connect that, even though there's more eyes, it's, I don't know, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, so for me, normally my nerve rating is 100% dependent upon who I know is watching. And like if we're playing and there's like family there or like really close friends, I get a lot more nervous because it's a similar thing where you're like, I know specific people are looking at me right now. Yeah. Whereas if we're on tour and we're like in whatever city and there's, however many thousands of people, but it's just like, it's just heads and bodies. Yeah. Then it's like, oh, these people don't know me. I don't know them. I'm just going to go out and have fun. And it's like it's fine. Yeah. The size of a crowd for me, it's not really a factor. It's more so like, or, if we're playing a fest and I know that there's like a band that I love that is like gonna watch us play, like I'll get
Yeah.
nervous for that. Like that,
You're
those
like,
sort of things. It's about the people that I know are there, not
yeah.
necessarily the amount of people that are there.
Do you guys
Yeah.
watch your own performance footage back, like a comedian watches his own set, or like a sports player watches game footage
The only time that we will do that, like we don't do it like as a group or like
together? Yeah.
officially. Yeah, it's more so if we are doing some sort of new production element, like whether it's, some sort of new LED thing or a new lighting idea or whatever, we'll look at videos to see how those things are coming across.
Mhm.
But that's it. Like we don't, if we could have those same videos without us in it, we'd prefer to watch those, but we're just a unfortunate byproduct of needing to be in those videos. So yeah, we're not fans of watching ourselves.
You guys really stepped up like with the live streams in the past couple of years, and like really put a lot of investment into those videos.
Mhm.
Was that a fun process, or was that mostly just like work?
No, it was super rewarding creatively.
Nice.
Yeah, it was obviously like every band in the world. We had tours that were booked, pre-COVID, and that ended up not happening. But then, the live stream thing, we had seen like one or two bands do live streams, but they were just like super awkward. And, we were like, if that's what
Sad.
doing a live stream is, then we're not going to do that. We're just going to wait this thing out. But then we did some brainstorming and we came up with some ideas that we thought would be able to get at least the general vibe across that we wanted to get. We wanted it to feel like it was a performance, and wanted it to feel like, a mix between being there live and like it being like a music video. And once we had nailed that, it was very rewarding, and it was nothing but positive response, which was great. Although I will say the first live stream show that we did was the most nervous I have ever been. And I can speak for Spencer, our singer, as well, because he said the same thing. Never been more nervous to play any show in our lives.
Oh, wow.
Because there is just, like Craig, you were talking about, if you're playing a small venue, that people are just like sitting there watching and they can just like see you. The idea of putting on this show, but knowing that everybody is just sitting in their living rooms or sitting at their computer and listening on headphones or like laptop speakers, and they're hearing every little thing.
Yeah.
And there's not a vibe in the room of a crowd. There's not
That energy, that reciprocal energy with a crowd that kind of gets you going and all that.
Yes. Yeah. There was not that, but we had designed our stage with that in mind. Like we wanted, like the stage that we did the first one on, it was completely round, and all the cameras were set up in the middle and everything, because we wanted to be able to play off of each other and like have that be where the energy comes from. But more so, like when you're playing live, there's there's just live sound. You can get away with a lot, like if you're hitting a couple wrong notes, it's like fine, because it's like it's just loud and blaring and whatever. But knowing that everybody was going to hear every note and everything was being recorded and it was going to live on the internet forever, all of that put together, like, and also right before the set, like we were just in this air-conditioned studio, and there's no crowd, there's no like pre-show like hype music that we would normally have. It's just like in a quiet room, like a guy being like, okay, 2 minutes, and we're just like, are we supposed to go and just like give it right now? And it ended up working out great. Like I could not be more happy with how all of those things turned out. But yeah,
it turned out nice.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys just gotta like just shake each other and just like get everyone all hyped up. Like, come on, man, let's go.
That's literally what we did. Like if there were footage of us like backstage, quote unquote, before we did those, it would have looked ridiculous. Like me and our singer have this thing that we always do before we go out on stage. It's the dumbest thing. But normally we're doing it, behind the stage when there's all kinds of people waiting for us and there's like set change music playing and it's like funny, but us doing it in a quiet air conditioned studio must have just looked so stupid.
It's funny. One thing that I was always doing to my singer when we were playing these shows, they're like, all right, 2 minutes before you guys got to play. And I was like, hey, is it too late to go home?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Is it too late to back out? No. All right, fine. I got to do it.
I have to pee at the last second always.
Yeah. That's the worst.
Yes.
You're just like, I got to use the bathroom. I'll be right back. And they're like, oh, you got 2 minutes. I'll be right back. Oh God.
I just have a few it's rapid fire on our part. It doesn't have to be rapid fire on yours, but they're just quick questions. The first one is, do you have a best recent purchase under $100?
Oh, this thing. It is one of those magnetic wallet things that goes on the back of your iPhone that's like MagSafe. I keep my debit card and my license in it, and it's only big enough for 2 cards. And since I bought this, I have not carried my wallet anywhere, and it's been great. It was like $15, and I never have to carry my wallet anywhere.
That's
Perfect. The next one is a favorite YouTube channel, podcast, or TV show at the moment.
I think Severance is probably the best show on television currently. If you have not seen it, you should watch it. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And I'll also say, I just got done listening to a podcast called The Dream, which is it's basically a deep dive on pyramid schemes. They call them multi-level Yeah, so yeah, that stuff always fascinates me. Because you see so many people on Facebook doing that sort of thing, and they really go deep on it, which I thought that was a really cool podcast.
Did you watch Lula Rich on Amazon Prime?
No.
It's about the LuLaRoe company. You should definitely watch it. If you like that podcast, you gotta watch it.
Okay, no, yeah. If there's anything having to do with MLMs, I'm in. I browse the anti-MLM Reddit sometimes. Same. It's fascinating. And I think my fascination with MLMs is similar to my fascination with cults, where it's like I just want to know what gets people. What makes people tick in those situations, So
yeah, Craig and I have been talking about that a lot recently, just like tribalism and everything, like Apple versus Android and AMD versus Nvidia, and like everything is like, oh, well, I'm part of this identity, I'm part of this tribe, and so we hate you.
Yeah. It's like charismatic personality versus someone who is missing something and desperately needs to find it, and they'll find it in anything that hooks them,
Yep. You saw the WeWork documentary, right?
Yes.
Oh, Craig, you should watch it. It's awesome. Like awesome. Everything you just said is exactly the WeWork documentary.
Oh, crazy.
I mean, the crazy thing about all of it is just the extreme rise and then just the fall is like, that whole thing is just captivating to watch. It's like a slow motion train
the whole
wreck.
Theranos situation is similar, which I love that. It's a little less culty, but still fascinating.
Yeah, it's wild.
I got my work cut out for me after this podcast, man. You guys got me watching all kinds of stuff.
All right, my last question for you is, what goals do you see yourself achieving in the next couple of years? What's next for Chris?
Oh, goals. I guess a somewhat silly but also kind of realistic goal. I've said that I would love to be watching something on a streaming channel, whether it's a documentary or a movie or whatever. And because whenever they have the subtitles where it says ominous music plays, I always tell my wife, I'm like, I'd love to have my own ominous music plays one day. Like being able to work on something like that, I think would just be a silly personal goal, but it would be something to me.
I think you're super close to that. I mean,
I hope so. We'll see. We'll see. But so that, and honestly, I just want to keep scoring films until I'm elderly. Like that's more of a long-term goal, but I'm just trying to continue doing this. That's what I want.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
I think you're going to do it.
We'll see. It's it's a wild industry, but I'm doing my best. And worst case is next couple of years it doesn't work out, and then I say, okay, well, I did something cool, and now I can pivot to, I don't know, whatever. Maybe I'll just be giving lessons. I'll just be a teacher from here on out if this whole lessons thing works out well.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see how that goes for you, man. You definitely got to let me know. Like,
that might crash and burn too. But hey, it's the showbiz, baby.
Yeah, man. You gotta try and apply. If it doesn't work, find the
There
next.
we go. Yes, exactly.
Well, dude, it's been a pleasure to have you on, man. It's been cool to hang out and chat and just talk about all the stuff that's going on, and definitely looking forward to seeing everything that you got going on and the lesson stuff. Good luck with all that. And
all right. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Chris, we'll catch you soon, man.
All right. Take care.
Peace.